You've heard me say sometimes you got to take the best boards first. The reality is, in a log like this, you got to cut the gangrene off first and try to save the patient.
Welcome to Hobby Hardwood, Alabama, a mom and pop operation that produces some of the finest grade hardwood lumber in the country.
Hey folks, welcome to another wonderful episode of Hobby Hardwood and Sawing with Robert Milton. I know this is your favorite YouTube channel. It certainly is mine. And today we're going to be sawing up some big old walnut. The goal on these logs is to get as much heartwood as possible, identify the stress plane to get flatter wood, cut out as much of the gangrene as possible up front to maximize the high grade yield from the back. This particular log has some issues to it, and walnut is valuable. So when you have issues in walnut, you got to make some decisions. By and large, this log is a very clean veneer grade, near veneer walnut log. It's got a big knot on the end, but the big issue is this. I'm going to zoom up on it a little bit by simply carrying the camera closer to it. A lot of digital effects here. Got this big old crack. You want to look down the side, kind of see how far it's going. It's going at least to there, right here. So I'm going to lose a foot. The other issue is this crack is perpendicular to the major stress in the log. The major stress in this log is going this direction and that direction, that way and that way. So these boards sawn parallel to these will bow. Typically the way you would saw this log is you would try to get as many boards in this line because they will crook, right? They'll crook, which you can edge off. The way I know the stress is in this direction is because if the stress was in this plane, this would be lifting up. The fact that it's sucking down over here, it's sucking down over there, shows me that these boards would have in fact been flat as a pancake. Boards down here would have been flat as a pancake. And basically I got a really nice log with a great big defect in it that I'm gonna have to try to motivate around somehow. A couple other things you might notice, or I'm gonna point out, is the log this is the butt. It's fat on this end. It's actually narrower on that end. That's good. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to isolate this defect as best as I can. I'm going to put the bottom of the log flat on the bed, and I'm going to parallel bark saw the bottom, but instead of parallel bark sawing the top, I'm going to get to right about here, and I'm gonna saw down parallel to the bed, or parallel bed sawing. And as I start taking the bell, this fat part of the log is the bell, the butt, and it looks like a bell, so it's called a bell. As I start taking boards off this side, this face, it's gonna take a lot off this face and a little bit off that face. Now, on this other face, I should be able to get down to here, get some good heartwood, and have at least half of the log that's above the defect cut away. And I can now concentrate, once I get this off, I can concentrate on the good wood. You've heard me say sometimes you got take the best boards first. The reality is, in a log like this, you gotta cut the gangrene off first and try to save the patient. A couple things you might want to notice. It's very off-center pith, which is fine because that allows me to clean this off. I know there's people gonna complain about this, but you do not want sapwood in a high-value walnut board. Sapwood shrinks at a different rate than heartwood. So what happens is if you saw 4/4 board with a lot of sapwood on it, you'll have heartwood in the middle, sapwood on the edges, right? That sapwood will dry and shrink at a different ratio than the heartwood. So basically what you're doing is you're putting 2-inch thick rubber bands on either side of the heartwood board. So when that sapwood shrinks, it's gonna try to take the heartwood and crumple it down. And that board's gonna bow. It's just the way it is. Now, in the commercial kiln world, instead of cutting it off like what I do, or what you should do, is they will leave the sapwood on there, they will put it into a steam chamber, they will heat the wood up with superheated steam, it runs the colors of the heartwood to the sapwood, and then what it does is it causes the sapwood fibers to break down, steam bending wood, remember the old steam bending of wood, and it causes the shrinkage of the sapwood to not be as pronounced. Generally keeps the walnut boards from bowing so much. If the rest of the world saws and leaves, which they do, if the rest of the commercial world that saws walnut leaves the sapwood on, and you're the only one around that takes the sapwood off, and furniture makers and high-grade lumber buyers do not want sapwood because it's a flatter piece of wood, it's got better color, and it's got something that no other piece of wood has, which is pure heartwood walnut. The goal on these logs is to get as much heartwood as possible, identify the stress plane to get flatter wood, cut out as much of the gangrene as possible up front to maximize the high grade yield from the back. You've got to be flexible, you got to be able to read the log. But right now my plan is parallel bed saw this face, cut this down as far as possible, square this up and get this out of my way as quick as possible. Since this log is very off-center, I should be left, I should get a few good boards out of it, but I should be left with a cant that's basically centered, which is what you want to do anyway. Like I say, you never know till you start sawing. So how about I just shut up, and how about we start letting the sawmill do the talking?
Thanks for visiting our sawmill. Click on the links above to see more of our videos.